So today I'm here with my friend Jeremy, founder of Mindful Buddy. Him and I linked up actually on LinkedIn
Yes.
and hit it off in a coffee shop. Saw that we were both very on the journey of self-realization and self-awareness and mindfulness. And yeah, so we've kind of cultivated this relationship, had some talks back and forth about business, had some talks about life itself. And yeah, now we're sitting down chatting all things self-awareness, emotional intelligence, mindfulness, and yeah, I'll pass it over to you.
Perfect. Well, Corey, thanks for having me, brother. Great to be having this conversation. I know we talked about it for, a couple of months now. So it's good to making it real, bringing it to life. And I'm excited to talk about all things consciousness, spirituality, mindfulness, emotional intelligence. So I'm excited to see where this conversation goes.
Yeah, so you have a different approach than a lot of people who are maybe on like a spiritual awakening journey or something, however they want to coin it. But you have the mindfulness approach, which I found interesting. I found that to be different than a lot of people who are caught up in like spirituality per se or self-realization, enlightenment. And it's more just the idea of like making it grounded in reality and like practical for normal people. So like what made you kind of take that approach to this journey?
Well, I think it's just normalizing it. Like that's my big mission is to I think a lot of people, when you start talking about spirituality or meditation, immediately our minds goes sort of towards like the Middle East, and it feels so much more foreign than our Western approaches to life. So I know there's a huge base of people who believe in spirituality, and there's a lot of domains that you could get into with spirituality. But I think with mindfulness, and a big part of it is really how mindfulness was brought here to the West. So mindfulness is a Western practice. Or Eastern practice. It comes from Buddhism. But they took one of the tenets of Buddhism, which comes from the Eightfold Pathway, which is right mindfulness. And they wanted to see if they could extract the Eastern qualities of it or the Eastern teachings of it and purely look at it from a scientific approach. And this really started in the 1970s with a gentleman named Jon Kabat-Zinn, who is a professional doctor. He worked in I think it was the Massachusetts hospital. And he sort of, verged into this mindfulness world. And he went over to India, and he studied Buddhism and had a profound experience. So I'm just sort of taking the torch from what's already been there and just trying to expand it now for myself personally, and then whoever I might come across or impact. And I think I'm just, my real mission is to make mindfulness as common as brushing our teeth, which, as silly as that might sound, I think we all sort of hope that the people we meet in our day-to-day brush their teeth, right? And it sounds like a silly thing to say, but that's how normal. Like, I want it to almost be like a weird thing. Like, if you talk to someone and you're like, so did you practice mindfulness today? And they're like, no. It'd almost be like, what? You didn't practice your mindfulness today? So it's more of making it normalized versus speaking language. I think language is interesting, and sometimes if you say something a certain way, it can almost turn somebody off. So I just want to, it's something to bring awareness into our life. It's something where we can check into the present moment, because the brain is so unique in the fact that we can have past thoughts, about the future. So we're projecting now into like what we might think the future is like based on our past experiences, when none of that's really real in the first place. So it's really just a way to become present in this moment, and like what really makes our memories are all these separate moments that we string together through our brain and memory, and then we call that a memory. So we're using those past moments, which this is a moment, and then this is a moment, and this is a moment. So there was a question posed one time that I heard, like, in which moment are you?
Only this one.
Only this one. But is it the way that your foot feels sitting on the bench? Is it the way your hands feel laying in your lap? Is it the way it feels when you your mouth is feeling a little dry and you have to get more saliva in your mouth. Like, which part of that is actually us?
Yeah, I feel very in tune with the idea of awareness, the idea of like our self-awareness. And I think the mindfulness journey is akin to that. And like, because mindfulness innately is just being present almost. Like, how would you define mindfulness if you could? In like a sentence?
Almost spot on. It's moment to moment awareness without judgment.
So our awareness, essentially, right? Like our human awareness is something that gets clouded by the thinking mind if we don't have any techniques to like kind of tame it, right? It's a bull. The mind's a bull, and like it's constantly looking to the past or looking to the future, worrying, anxiety, fear, doubt, all of it, right? Like all of these afflictions that we experience like bring us out of the present moment. And I've really leaned into the idea of like coming to understand myself so that I may be present, right? And like being, and like the idea of mindfulness for me is just being with myself and not letting all the noise cloud my actions, cloud my judgments, cloud this world. It's like, if I'm going to be brushing my teeth, like, let me brush my teeth. If I'm going to eat my food, let me eat my food. If I'm going to drive my car, drive my car. And like, we're so caught up in doing 1,000 things at once. Like, we're driving our car and we're checking our text messages and we're listening to music. We got our hand out of the window. We're singing a song. We're like, that's 5 things right there. We're thinking about what we're going to eat for dinner when we get home. It's like, holy, like, slow down. Like, we gotten so fast, and like, my brain works fast. Like, I have a hyperactive brain. So I've found it's a superpower when you can like reel that in and like be present in this moment. And like, what can you create then, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel the exact same way. I mean, I was diagnosed with late onset ADHD. So when I was like 22 years old. And I think it's that feeling of just like you have all these thoughts and it's like, which direction do I want to go? And you're kind of like the pinball machine and the ball's just bouncing all over the place. And I think a lot of us, we're almost conditioned to have ADHD in today's society. If you think about all the scrolling on the phones and just wanting to be everywhere but here in the present. And we could even call that escapism. And I think we find that a lot in television shows, in sports, in news media, and almost wanting to find an escape out of the present moment. And what I found is usually the present moment isn't nearly as bad as we are imagining if we just were to tune into the now without judgment. And I think that's the key part of mindfulness is we're so judgmental about ourselves and about the world that we're creating on a moment-to-moment basis. And this can be, I think a lot of it's probably developed into us from an early childhood. From the time we're like 6 years old to 11 years old, our frame of thinking comes from our parents and what's being conditioned inside of us. And we almost have to unlearn that as we get older, because I think a lot of the results and feelings that we have on a day-to-day basis is sort of like this replay of our childhood, of something that was missing or lacking, or what we viewed or saw from our friends, parents, educators, coaches. All of that had to impact us in some way, whether we call it positive or negative. Even in mindfulness, we want to reframe things as whether it being good or bad. Is this helpful or is this harmful? Because there's a lot of judgment that comes from saying this is good or this is bad. And I think whenever we think of things as in a negative terms or in something being bad, it sort of just throws us in this loop, right? We take an action, we feel bad about it, and then we need to feel better about it. So we end up in that same cycle of just repeating that, whether it's drugs, friends, hanging out, whatever we're trying to do to escape that negative feeling. But yet we just always return to it because we never actually become aware of that. So I think through mindfulness, there's a term called vipassana, which stands for insight. And through mindfulness, we start to gain insight into our thoughts and realizing that we are not our thoughts. Really, our thoughts are like our ego. It's as part of this that's like a protection mechanism that's trying to make us cope with the crazy world that we live in. But whenever we can sort of detach that judgment from our thinking and we can put it more in terms of, is this helpful or is this harmful? I think we start to look at the world in a little bit of a different place.
So, I guess what are some things that we can do to be more mindful and aware about ourselves leading this life, and not putting labels on everything? Because I think that's innately what gets us out of mindfulness, is like, we see a girl walking down the street, it's like, she's hot, or that's a cool car, like, it's beautiful out today. It's like, we just, rather than just being with what is, we stick a label on everything. It takes us out of the moment.
What can help with that? I think tuning into the present moment, and the only way you're going to do that is through practice, right? So that's a big reason why I created Mindful Buddy, is because we're so busy all the time. I know myself personally, I live off of my calendar. I always say, if it's not on my calendar, it doesn't exist. So it's really finding time to sit still. And now I know there's 1,000 different meditations out there. You can go on YouTube right now or online and find a different person teaching a different method of meditation. But I think what mindfulness is it's really meditating for real life, for applying it into the real world. And not to say any form of other meditation can't be applied to the other real world, but I think a lot of times, mindfulness is coming back to ourself, and it's normal to have a lot of thoughts. So whenever we sit down and practice mindfulness, the expectation might be that, oh, I need to not have any thoughts. And I think that's where a lot of people stop meditating, because they start to have judgments. And like, once they're 1 minute into the meditation or 2 minutes into the meditation, they're like, I'm having all these thoughts. I can't stop my thoughts. I must be really bad at this, so I'm just not going to meditate anymore. Or they meditate and they feel bored. They feel a sense of like, oh my gosh, like, it's only been 2 minutes. Are you kidding me? Like, I can't do this, right? I need to be moving. I need to be doing something. So I think with mindfulness, it's learning to always come back to ourselves and be present with what's there. So if you're feeling a sense of boredom, you can say, oh, that's what boredom is like. It's getting really curious. And it's almost like the little kid who's 5 years old. He's like this really curious bee that just wants to learn everything and wants to look in every crook and nanny and just wants to know what is this and what is that. And I think it's having that same level of, discovery inside of ourselves. We become like the scientist of our own mind. And it's real simple. You can start with mindful breathing and using our breathing as an anchor. And whenever we focus on our breathing, it's just that gentle reminder to come back to our breath. Whenever we've noticed our thoughts drifting off, it's normal. It's normal to have a lot of thoughts, but we gently remind ourselves, oh, come back to the breath. And we use that in everyday living, right? So in everyday living, when I notice that I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling stressed or I'm feeling depressed, I can ground myself in my breath. So it's a practice, because when I need it in real life, I can always come back to my breath. And I like to say that my breath is my friend, because it's always this safe haven that I know I can always return to, and my breath is always with me.
I like that. We do. That's the one thing that you can always come back to. Yeah, the idea of coming back to ourselves is, we get caught up in other things outside of us. And I found myself doing it, and I'm sure you do it still, and I do it still. It's just
all
like
the time.
Like most of our existence ends up being caught up on things outside of ourselves. But it is when you can take that deep breath and come back to yourself and just like feel what it means to like be me, like, and that's important. I like what you have to say about mindfulness and like making it a practice, because I think a lot of people live at the mercy of their minds. They're enslaved by their own thoughts, and it's when we can come back to ourselves and in practice every day like that. I mean, in Eastern philosophy, your daily sadhana, right? Your daily spiritual practice, right? It's like mindfulness is a part of that. Taking a breath, giving yourself space, feeling yourself. Don't do everything with a bunch of other things in your mind. Like, empty yourself and then pick up your coffee and pour it and like And just being very present with yourself is like so powerful for being able to find joy in those little moments, because it's like, I think sometimes myself included, like I get caught up in like doing all these things, like then I'll be happy. Like I got to do all this stuff, then I'll be at peace. Like I'll once I get all this stuff done, like then I can relax. And it's like, no, I can take a deep breath while I'm doing it and like enjoy the joy of like action at the same time. It doesn't need to all be over before I enjoy it.
Yeah, right. It's kind of like I guess eating a sundae or like dessert or whatever food you might like a lot, right? It's like you eat it so fast sometimes, and then like you're finished eating it and you didn't even like enjoy the thing that you were just eating. You know, I mean, how many times have you had a dessert and like wished you would have had another one or whatever? I don't know if you even like dessert. You like dessert?
I like
What's
dessert.
your favorite dessert?
I like dessert. But I'm an ice cream guy.
Ice cream guy?
Yeah.
Okay. What's your you got a favorite flavor?
Not really. Just anything.
No, anything?
Anything cold
Okay.
and sweet.
Fair enough. So like when you're eating ice cream, right? It's like whenever you're touching the spoon, feeling that the coolness of the spoon, and then being able to just look at, like there's another practice called mindful eating, and we'll use a raisin in mindfulness. And you almost like how they'll describe it is like, imagine you're on an alien ship and you just got beamed down to Earth and you've never been to Earth before. And this is your first time seeing a raisin. So you have to look at it and all the creases, and like just thinking about if you like just got beamed to Mars and like you found a raisin there, you'd be like, oh my gosh, there's raisins here, you know? And like you'd be so impressed and amazed by it, right? And it's like when you take the time to slow down and look at all the little crevices and the wrinkles and the different colors and the shades of colors, and you're really absorbing in that moment how it feels in your hand, how the textures feel in your hand, and then like that anticipating feeling of like, I'm ready to take a bite of this now. Like, what does that feeling feel like in your body? Like, where are you feeling that? Are you feeling like yourself salivating some? Are you feeling any tension in your body, like anticipating like about to take a bite of something yummy? And then like once you put it in your mouth, like rather than taking a bite and eating it or chewing it, just noticing what's happening in the mouth, right? But you know, how often do we slow down enough to like notice all the sensations happening in just that moment? Very rarely.
Yeah, the mindful eating is an interesting practice. That was like one of the first mindful practices that I started to incorporate because I've always had this, like, I played football, so I was like overweight, and I'd always like loved eating a whole bunch, and and so food is something like I had to work through, like my relationship with food. So my senior year of college, I was incorporating mindful eating, and I'd sit down with like a cup of blueberries and just like that. You just look at the blueberry, see the sun glaring off of it, put it in your mouth, feel it on your tongue, feel it break between your teeth, feel it like. It was just such an interesting practice to slow down. It would take you 15 minutes to eat a whole cup of blueberries. Right. But it's like, whoa, like those blueberries were so amazing because you were actually had them rather than just taking them by the handful.
Absolutely. So what was that experience like for you? Like what brought you into mindful eating and having that new experience?
So I did my thesis project in college on yoga and Eastern philosophy. I was very interested in spirituality, and I had just started to like re-explore. I grew up like Christian and Catholic, but re-explore like God and like understanding that. And I started to do so through like Eastern philosophy and the concept of yoga and Taoism, Buddhism. So specifically research in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism, and just started to like, basically my thesis project was me studying yogic philosophy and Eastern philosophy and putting it into practice for my whole entire senior year. So I was doing study in the library like 6 to 10 hours a week, like reading books and religious texts and taking notes, filling up a journal, and then like taking all the meditative practices and yoga movement, the hatha yoga part of it, breath work, mindful eating, the noble eightfold path in Buddhism, as much as I could incorporate into a college lifestyle, I put it all into practice, and then I made a film about it. So
no way.
So yeah, so that was sort of one of the things that I began to incorporate as I put myself through that little experiment of like almost like asceticism.
Wow.
In senior year of college, with the sprinkle of like going out to the bar in there. But,
Of course, you're in college.
I'm 21. I can only be so holy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Wow. I mean, that's pretty noble though, to like take that on, especially your senior year, because everyone's like, all right, it's my senior year. I've got to go hard in the paint, right?
Yeah. So that was super interesting. It was like a profound shift in consciousness when you start to like really lean into yourself like that, and just like put a sense of awareness into like what you're doing on the day to day. Because I think so many people are just unconsciously living, and they don't even realize the days are passing, the weeks are passing, the months are passing, and then before they know it, like their whole lives gone. And like I did not want that to happen to myself. So I was like, let's become aware at a young age and so I can live this life to the fullest and be here for it.
Yeah. Would you say there was a moment where like you realized you needed more awareness? What led to you choosing that as your thesis for your senior year?
So I had been going through like a spiritual awakening for a couple of years of just like researching into like consciousness and conspiracy theories and just like alternate philosophies and getting away from like the paradigms that I'd been taught in Rockefeller education growing up and like right. The CCD and going to church and whatnot growing up, and just like thinking about things outside the box. And ultimately it began with some psychedelic exploration and then ultimately really getting into meditation, which I dove into myself deeply. And like I was meditating every day and doing 30 minutes to an hour meditation every day, and like giving myself the space for silence and stillness, and just going to the beach and practicing Qigong as I was learning that, and like really leaning into the creative practices as well, because like I think a big part of my daily practice of mindfulness is like creativity. It's like every single day I create things, and most of my day is creative. It's creating videos, it's writing music, it's writing poetry and songs, and it's for me, I really like figured out who I was through creativity, and like it's almost like navigating that process for me is like I tap into my subconscious through these things that I can create. So ultimately all those things combined brought me into being interested in the concepts of yoga and Eastern philosophy, because I felt like that kind of bridged the gap of like what I was looking for in regards to like some connection to the divine. And yeah. Right.
So it's more of like a curiosity for you would say, like rather than anything else, like just.
Yeah, it was a curiosity. And also I like I wasn't comfortable with like what I was doing and drinking all the time and vaping and like relationships with women, and a whole bunch of it was just like didn't sit right with me. And I think I had a lot of like shame and guilt about the things that I was doing, the things that I had done in my past, and I needed to like work through that. You know?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's like a lot of times, I mean, same story for me, right? Like I think there's a bit of a lack of awareness sometimes that we have in life, and makes us choose paths that are not ultimate. It seems short-term beneficial, but it's not long-term beneficial, like drinking, smoking weed, or any drug really at that. I mean, I think psychedelics fall into a different category altogether. But I know for me, it was really an emotional state, falling into depression and falling into this lack of self-worth. And I've had 2 times in my life where I've fallen into like sort of this deep like depression. Once when I was like 16 and I was partying super hardcore in high school, and I came back to my roots of Christianity to come out of that. And then once again when I was 26, and I found myself in this deep state of envy and jealousy of a really close friend, like someone who I consider a best friend. And I realized that I was pointing the finger at someone else for my inadequacies. And that was a big leap in my journey, was starting to meditate. And I just downloaded an app and I started meditating. But what I end up realizing is that all these thoughts that are in my head are just illusions, they're delusions, and they're diluting the present moment. And once I was able to realize that I am not my thoughts, and I think that's sort of like, I call it being the zombie in life, right? Like you're just waking up, you're going to work, you're dealing with the drama of life, what's going on in the news, what's, this person doing, what's that person doing? We just kind of get into the middle of those conversations, and we love drama as a human society. I think it's exciting, and sometimes if someone's doing worse than us, it makes us feel better about ourselves. But what I just realized in starting my mindfulness practice and in the very early journey was that we are not our thoughts. And I think that's one of the things you learn on very early in mindfulness is like we have 6,000 to 8,000 thoughts a day. Imagine just attaching our emotions to each one of those thoughts and letting it pull us in a certain direction. Like how many different directions would we go? But we're having those thoughts all day long. And most people think that they are their thoughts. And they're not living with that awareness of being able to detach themselves from a thought and bring themselves back to the present moment.
So what are your thoughts on like your heart intelligence and your heart-centered awareness rather than being aware of the thoughts up here? Because I 100% agree, like we are not our thoughts. And I've found it's been very beneficial for me to take my awareness and rather than focus it up here, bring it back down into my heart. Do you have any thoughts around that?
But I would actually love to hear your thoughts on it first, and maybe it'll bring something more out of me.
So your heart essentially is, you have your dantians, right? And the whatever Buddhist philosophy, right? You have your mind, you have your heart, and then you have your stomach, right? And those are the three dantians. There's three brains essentially. Like there's intelligence, there's neurons in your heart, there's neurons in your stomach, there's neurons in your brain. And I've found that, when you look at a human being, the center of our being is our heart. If you look at the human torus field, like everything, right, that point of singularity around our energetic body is like that point within our heart. And like finding that as the core of our being rather than this, I've found helps me dramatically get out of my head almost. And like, if I am going to come back to the present moment, rather than taking a deep breath and thinking about what's up here, taking a deep breath and feeling what's in here, because that's not thinking and that's not worrying and that's not anxious. Like your heart's not anxious ever. Like it's just constantly beating, And I listen to a lot of Ram Dass. Are you familiar with Ram Dass?
Yes. Yeah.
So something I subscribe to and not subscribe to, but a practice that I took was I am loving awareness, was mantra. So I would repeat like I am loving awareness in my meditations in my daily life, and like I am loving awareness, and like take my awareness and focus it into my heart as I'm doing that. And it took me out of this head brain and into my heart brain and allowed me to lead like more of a conscious, thoughtful, and like heart leading life with around love rather than like around any afflictions and insecurities I could be having up here.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's what you're talking about in mindful practice is what we call loving kindness. Mm-hmm. And I think a big part of it is like the neural loop in our brain. And like, if you've ever seen a brain, it has these like grooves in it. And I sort of look at those grooves as like a record player. If you were to look at a record and, if anyone, remembers what a record player looks like, I know that those are like ancient now. But, they have little grooves in them, and then like you have the little pin that you put on the record and it plays the record. Like same thing with our brain. So one saying, I might have mentioned this, but it's where your focus goes, your energy flows. So if we've been on this energy loop of negativity or hate or envy or any of the lower vibrating emotions that we might experience as a human being, if that plays enough times, that becomes a loop in our brain. That becomes, the record player just playing again over and over again. So when what you're talking about is retraining the brain. And I think we have, like, just like anything else, like we can become really good at hating and we can become really good at loving. But again, where do we spend the most of our time and energy focusing? And I think if you find yourself on that other end of the spectrum of more hating life, hating people, negative thoughts, wanting the world to end, or it just seems like anything in life has a negative feeling or experience attached to it. That could be a symptom of our parents. That could be a symptom of, our friends that we hung out with, right? Like ultimately are we feeding our brain on a daily basis? And we're creatures of habit. So whatever we're doing every single day is going to be somewhat similar. Now, it might look a little bit different, right? You might wake up a few minutes later. You might put on different socks, or in a shirt. You might, the traffic might look different on a certain day, but ultimately we all have the same type of music that we listen to on a daily basis. We all kind of have the same TV shows that we like to listen to on a daily basis. We all have the same friends that we might call up and talk to on a daily basis. So there's sort of a theme to each of our lives, right? And it's sort of falling on that positive spectrum or that hurtful spectrum. And a lot of it, I think, coming back to our main topic of awareness, is we're lacking the awareness of there's inputs and there's outputs, right? What are we inputting into our brain? And then that's ultimately going to be the output of how we feel on a daily basis. So coming back to the loving kindness and being heart-centered, like with love and feeling, I think it has to be almost trained in the brain first, right? And I think for us to be aware of that, like we have to spend time in meditation, and we have to spend time doing exactly what you were saying, like repeating love and like, what does love feel like? And we can create loving feelings right now in this moment. Like if we just closed our eyes and imagine someone that you love dearly right now. It could be your mom, dad, girlfriend, brother, sister, whoever it is. But if you close your eyes and you imagine that person right in front of you right now, and you just see them and they have the biggest smile on their face and they're smiling at you, and it's just one of those unconditional smiles where you just know that they love you so much, and then they just embrace you with this warm hug right now, and you just feel that energy flowing through you and that lovingness that's just, coming from their bodies, and they're just sharing that with you, and you can just really be deep in that loving feeling right now. And we can experience this at any moment. But again, how are we programming our brains? And we program our brains by intentionally sitting down, by intentionally practicing. So in loving kindness, what we'll do is exactly what you said, is we'll start saying, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be safe, and may I be loved. And you might repeat that to yourself just like that for 2 minutes. And then you start thinking about a close friend or a close loved one, and you imagine them in your mind, and you start saying, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be safe, may you be loved. And then you extend that to an acquaintance. So maybe someone you work with or someone you might see every now and again. You'll think of them and repeat those words. And then you get down to a stranger, and then you even say it to an enemy. So think of someone, maybe, they walk in the room and they kind of, take all the oxygen out of the room, and it's just like, oh, that one person, they just rub you the wrong way and you don't know what it is, but like they just irk you. Even sending them loving kindness. And, again, where our focus goes, our energy flows. So if we're focusing on love, again, that becomes a conditioning of the mind. In the mind, there's what's called neuroplasticity. So our mind has the ability to change. You ever hear like an older person say like, once you get past 40, like you just are who you are. It's impossible to change. That's actually not true. Like we have the ability to change throughout our entire life. But I think we've become so familiar with identifying as, well, this is just who I am. The thought is I cannot change. But if we want to change, we can change. It just takes time and practice. So what they found is you have to practice mindfulness for about 8 weeks, doing about 30 minutes to an hour a day, to really see the changes in your brain. But what's happening is we're forming new neural connections. So with every new experience that we have in life, we're creating new neural connections in our mind. Now, how strong are those connections will determine how present they are in our life, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I think it's a bit of, it's awareness, but it's also that practice, right? Because some of us might be stuck in the practice of feeling negative emotion. And then we project that in how we feel and how we talk and the sort of things that we listen to on a daily basis. So I think if you're not practicing, it's going to be very hard, like, to tune into the loving heart awareness, or how did you call it?
Mm-hmm. I said, well, the mantra that I was practicing was I am loving awareness.
I am loving awareness.
Tuning into the heart intelligence, essentially. But yeah, so kind of going off of what you're saying there, almost brings us up into like emotional intelligence. Because I think a lot of people get stuck into lower states of consciousness, lower states of awareness, because they're unconscious of the emotions that they're feeling on a day-to-day basis. They're unaware that there are higher emotions that they could feel on a day-to-day basis. And they may be, like you said, constantly in these thought loop cycles, constantly living in fear, constantly living in survival states of fear and angst and grief and shame and anger, right? And they're not quite sure why. And it's frustrating, I'm sure, for people when they live like that. So, like, I'm sure emotional intelligence and like that concept feeds into mindfulness. And have you done any research yourself and like the correlation between the two, and like maybe how emotional intelligence can feed into a more mindful life?
I think it does tie into mindfulness, absolutely, because I think with mindfulness, we just gain awareness through the different practices. And I think the more aware we become, the more tuned in we'll be to ourselves, the more we'll be tuned in to other people. Because once you can notice the emotions inside of you, it's like a mirror, right? You can notice the emotions in someone else as well. And I think emotional intelligence is being aware of our own emotions, and therefore being aware of the emotions of other people, and then learning how to navigate those two. Like, how do I navigate my own emotions? How do I navigate the emotions of someone else? And again, bringing in another mindful practice here is the body scan. I think is really helpful with that. And body scan is when we tune in to different parts of our body. So you might start with focusing on your foot, and you would close your eyes and you would start thinking about your feet. And you might bring your attention to your left foot and what are the different sensations that you're feeling in your left foot. And then you bring that all the way up to your legs, into your torso, into your face. And you really learn to tune into the different sensations in your body. And I think that's really helpful for emotional intelligence, because whenever we get mad, you ever feel like your face is getting hot, right? Whenever you're getting anxious, is your heart beating a little bit faster? Does your breathing change a little bit? So again, we're gaining that awareness of our body. And I know before I started practicing mindfulness, I used to really deal with anger a lot. And I would just lash out of anger, so much so I even punched a wall one time because I was so angry and I broke my pinky finger like an idiot, But that was like a real wake-up call for me, because I couldn't catch the signs of my own emotions to a point where I got so mad that I had to punch the wall. But now, because of my mindfulness practice, I can begin to become aware of like, okay, I can feel my shoulders tightening up. I can feel my face getting a little heat coming off of it. I can feel my breathing is a little sporadic right now. And it all happens so quickly, right? We can go from like 0 to 100 real fast. And I think without having that daily practice, it's just so easy to give into it, because I think it's the ego. The ego, we feel so justified by our own feelings, right? It's really hard to admit that we're wrong sometimes. So we feel justified by how we're feeling, and we just let the other person have it because of that justification. But I think through the body scan, I think through becoming aware of the chemical reactions that are happening in our body, and then having the awareness of our thoughts, we can see, okay, this is anger. I'm experiencing anger right now. And when I'm angry, my shoulders get tense, my chest gets a little bit tight, my breathing becomes a little bit more shallow, and those are the signs of being angry. Now, can I just take a 10-second pause right now? I think the power of the pause has really helped me become more emotionally aware of myself and others. And I think whenever you become more emotionally aware of yourself, it's easier to let go of my ego. And now I can tap into you. And when I can tap into like your field of awareness, and I can kind of put myself to the side and say, well, how is Corey feeling right now? And a lot of the signs of how we're feeling are worn through our facial expressions. It's worn through, right? If I'm angry, like I might be a little bit tight like this, right? Or I might be playing with my hands a lot, right? So you can start to pick up on those physical cues to notice, like, is someone feeling anxious? Are they pacing back and forth? Or do they look like they're not in the present moment? And that all just takes time, I think, in awareness and building. I mean, I don't think mindfulness is the only way to gain emotional intelligence, but I think it's definitely one of the ways, for sure. What are your thoughts on emotional intelligence and how to gain more experience?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. Like, your own emotional intelligence lets you go out in the world and understand other people even better as well. But also, by understanding other people better, you can understand yourself better. So it's like a give-take relationship. And we kind of got into it talking about people who may be living unconsciously. And like, I think it's predominantly most people. A majority of people nowadays in our society are living unconsciously, right? They may be doing a monotonous 9-to-5 job that they might not quite love and enjoy, that lights them up, and they're watching Netflix every day, and they're maybe just going through the motions. Like, a lot of people go through the motions and live for a weekend, right? And it's like, and I think it's because they don't see a way out of it. There's like not that awareness that there's higher emotions, right? Like, so I've come to almost like alchemize my emotions and like utilize understanding like what are the lower emotions versus the higher emotions, and like aligning myself intentionally with things like acceptance and willingness and love and peace and joy, and like really appreciating those as they come, but also being able to focus on those as the equal and opposite of the ones that when I'm feeling down, like I can tap, like you said, like loving kindness meditation. It's like, it's the same idea when you're understanding yourself emotionally. Like, you can get yourself out of a rut because you understand like you're the master of your mind, and you can just use the power of your thoughts to like get out of a deep place. And I mean, it's easier said than done, but it is that simple. And like, I think a lot of people kind of look past the idea that like, it's not escaping our mind. It's like making your mind your best friend. And like, that's the idea behind mindfulness, is like your mind's your friend at the end of the day. Mindful buddy, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah. I think that alkalizing, I think that was a really good term to use. And yeah, I think when something becomes acidic, right, it's like eating away. And alkalizing is like refreshing. And it made me think of a term called equanimity, and there's a powerful story that goes along with equanimity. And imagine you're floating down a river, and on the left side of the river there's all hell breaking loose, like fires. It literally looks like hell on earth. And then the right side of the river, it looks like heaven on earth, like beautiful. All the trees have beautiful fruits on it. It's like the sky is sparkling. But what equanimity is putting the blinders on both sides, and all you see is right in front of you. And I think that what that means for me is I'm like a high emotional person. I'm like the rah, 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 like want to get excited. But I think that also means like I have extreme lows too. So there's like extreme highs and there's extreme lows. And one thing I'm learning is just to be in the middle of it, not to get too excited by all the grandiose things, and don't get too low by the negative things, but I'm just in my little canoe riding down the river, just whatever's right in front of me. And I think there was something else you said about like, making things blissful or peaceful, or, I think that kind of comes back to our judging mind. Like, we want to attach like, this is good, this is bad, but we can kind of just let that go, and we can just be present with what is right now. It's typically not as bad as we think. For example, like I had to get a cavity done. I used to hate going to the dentist, and I used to just think about like how they're going to drill in my mouth, and all the terrible sounds that you hear as they're drilling in your mouth. And then when they're actually drilling in your mouth, you're like, oh, this sucks and this is painful, and they're all up in my mouth and my grill, and I really hate this. But what I've learned is actually through mindfulness, like it's actually not that bad, because when I just sit and I breathe and I'm in the dentist chair and they're putting their fingers all in my mouth. I'm not having thoughts. I'm not thinking, oh, this sucks. I hate this. This is so uncomfortable. This is really uncomfortable for me. I'm just focusing on my breathing and I'm just letting it happen. And I think they've done the studies now with like, a lot of people who have cancer, terminal illness, and practicing mindfulness has really significantly helped people reduce their own suffering, because what happens is suffering is mainly in the brain. It's in the mind, right? So we think about suffering all the time and we think about the pain, but actually thinking about it actually adds more to the current experience that we're having it. So we're like overthinking about our pain. We're like overthinking about how life is too hard. And I think we just get so stuck in that pattern. Again, it's just like a pattern, right? I just think like the brain is like this one big record player. And like we have to, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So if we just keep playing that same loop on a daily basis, and that's where I think practice becomes so important, just like anything in life. Like we can't become better at it if we don't practice. And literally we're practicing meditation to become non-reactive, to be equanimous, to alkalize ourselves, to alkalize our brain, right? Because if we don't get out of the pattern, we'll just keep on that same loop. And people always say, why do bad things always happen to me?
Because you believe they do.
Right. Because you're on that pattern, right? You're telling yourself, oh, bad things always happen to me. So therefore it's like our mind is like a flashlight. Wherever you focus, like that's where the flashlight's going to go. So if you're like, well, bad things are always focused. Well, there's a bad thing, but there was a good thing that was right next to the bad thing, right? But because I had my flashlight on the bad things and I've trained my brain to only be focused on the bad things, therefore that's what I'm going to see. But if you train your brain to not even see the positive things, but to just be like, oh, there's a thing. It doesn't have to be good or bad.
Yeah, it's taking the labels and the judgments off of it. The world is. I mean, it is what it is, and we seem to come up with these words that whatever restrict it. Like we restrict our own experience of life itself by putting all labels on top of it. It's like if you're watching a beautiful sunrise, you don't sit there and say, wow, how beautiful is this? How beautiful is this? How beautiful is this? Like you just sit there and be with it. Right? It's like when you're in love and you're in the park with your girlfriend, you're not saying, wow, I love you so much. I love you so much. You're not thinking that. It's just it's a feeling, right? And it's like tuning into the present moment and being with these experiences and not sticking a label on it and limiting it. It's like I feel like for me, a lot of times like I'll find myself being quite present. Like I'll be in the kitchen. I'll say, I'm going to be real mindful about like the way that I prepare this food. I'm gonna be mindful, whatever. I'm gonna put love into the food. I'm gonna be careful and take my time doing it. And I won't have any music on, just me and the stove and the ingredients, and I'm taking it together, and it'll be a great experience, just me and myself, and I'm present. And then towards the end, I say, wow, like I was super there for this whole thing, and then that's when I spill over my milk, or that's when I spill something, right? It's like I give myself the pat in the back, like wow, I did something good, and then that's where I'm not so present anymore, right? It's like it's an interesting game that we play.
It is. I think it's just that the ego again, and like I of course do it too. It's just it constantly wants to reward itself, or it constantly wants to judge itself. Like it constantly wants to come back to the thinking mind. And I think it might just be a condition of maybe living in the modern Western world, and we're just so stuck in sort of this consciousness that it really wants to always pull us back. And like we almost, I don't know if fight or even tussle is the right word to say, but it takes that grounding, right? It takes being present with yourself and say, I'm going to be present. But it's noticing once you're not present and then just bringing yourself back to it. Because again, we're having so many thoughts throughout the day. It's like you pat yourself on the back and it's like, all right back to the presence, right back to the breath, right back to the, salt shaker, right back to the just being in the now. And it is difficult. Like another term in mindfulness is beginner's mind. Always approaching something as if it's the first time you've ever done it before. Because when you're a kid and you see something for the first time, it's always so amazing. Like I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and it's like, it's so amazing. Like when they see something for the first time, their eyes are just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And it's like almost having that like childlike wonder again, like doing things like, but we've just done them so often and so many times, it just becomes like, oh, this is the routine of life. This is just the mundane of life. Like I just have to get through this so I can get to the next thing, so I can get to the next thing and get to the next thing. And it's like always about getting to the next thing, but then I'm never just right here.
And kids do a really good job of like curiosity and wonder, like you said. And that's something that I love going back to and trying to cultivate within myself. And it's like, that's not something that's outside of us. Like that innocence that your children have, it's beautiful. It's like, it's they're present. Like they're here. They don't have all the chatter as we do. They don't have all the voices in their head. They don't have insecurities and doubts. They're building pillow forts and they're talking to imaginary friends. And it's like that creativity, that curiosity is something that we can cultivate. And like, you had the analogy of like putting the blinders on and like the river, and the one side being like hell, the other side being, wow, like heaven. And I heard another analogy very similar to that. It's like the child's mind is like a ball in a river. Like a child's mind, if you throw a beach ball or a soccer ball in a river and it's just floating down, it does have thoughts, but it doesn't get caught on those thoughts. We have one thought and then we go down a thought spiral. We go down a thought loop and it triggers all these other thoughts. But a child can think, wow, like look at that squirrel in the tree. Oh, that's a cool car. And they just keep it pushing. They don't get caught up on the past. They don't get caught up in their own mind. They're just always creating something new. They're always looking at things with curiosity, and like it's just so innocent, honestly. And we kind of lose that at some point, and it's kind of a process of getting back to it.
I mean, I think it really starts to happen when we're like 6 to 11, like through my studies and what I've learned, like those are like huge impressionable years for us. And like, you kind of see it more like starting in like middle school and high school. And I think like, if you think about impression, like it's being impressed upon us. Right. And, I think a lot of it, if you think 200 years ago, like they didn't have TVs. They didn't have, so like a lot of our influence and what's impressed on us, like was largely either cultural or by our families. But I think now with the amount of social media and TV that we have, it's so much easier to get into this, there's just so much happening all the time. And it can almost feel like, whatever's happening across the country is happening right in our backyard. I know for me, it's really easy to be comparing like someone else's lifestyle versus my lifestyle. And I think getting into this comparing narrative, it can feel like we're not good enough, can feel like I'm not doing enough, can feel like I'll never be that good or I'll never look that good. And I don't think like we start to realize that until like our teen years, maybe. And like people start to point things out to us that we never realized before. I know I used to get made fun of all the time as a kid because I guess I have a naturally slightly larger forehead. So like kids used to make fun of me all the time for having a big forehead or whatever. But like, so like you start to feel that shame. You start to feel that like, oh man, maybe I don't look good. Maybe I do have a big forehead. Maybe I'm not good enough. Right. And, I think there's like just a lot of that happens throughout our childhood and even into adulthood, right? Just sort of these happenings in life, and we get this feedback of, people saying not nice things to us, or maybe our parents weren't the greatest role models to us, or maybe we didn't have great friends who treated us poorly or got us into bad situations, and that just becomes our experience. So our mental loop, or the record player, starts to keep telling us like, well, don't expect much out of life, or life is just like that because, that's just the way life is, because that's what we've always seen and what we've always experienced. So somehow life just has this like damning effect on a lot of us that like life is just hard and it's never going to get easy. But I think, it takes a lot of energy to pull ourselves out of that like low energy force field that just I think most people are kind of humdrumming at, right? Because it takes the awareness of ourselves first. And I think ultimately, you know what it really is like, I don't know if you've had like a really low point in your life, but what I find is, at least in my life and in what I've seen in a lot of other people's lives, it almost takes like going off the cliff of like almost being at that, like you're at your breaking point to realize that things need to change. Like, was there a breaking point for you, or like?
Yeah, like freshman year of college, I was like just fat and not eating Lucky Charms, spilling cereal over myself before going to bed, and hitting a vape and high every day and drinking every weekend, and didn't like my girlfriend. It was just like, it was like everything was crashing down on me at one point. And yeah, so it's like, I agree. Like you have to not you have to, but most people hit something where they say something's got to change, and that's like the way back up, you know.
Why do you think that is? Like, what's your opinion? Like,
well, I think that there's just an overwhelming feeling of maybe negative emotions that you may be feeling, maybe just an overwhelming feeling that you can't go on like this any longer. A realization that if I continue to live like this, I'm not going to want to live, you know? And it's like maybe, I mean, I was never like suicidal or anything, but it's like, but I had the idea, like, if I keep living like this, I'm not going to enjoy life. And that was scary to me. And I mean, I don't know if I'd call myself quite depressed or like having real mental health issues, but I hit a point where I was just like, something's got to change, or this whole life thing isn't going to work out too well for me.
Like, what was your journey of discovery for that? Like, what did you first start doing to like become more emotionally aware, or to just become aware of yourself in general?
It started with learning and doing the things that I loved to do when I was a kid, honestly, and like leaning back into music and playing guitar a bunch. And drawing. I used to love drawing. And I was like, why did I stop doing this? Like, somebody might have told me it was gay one time, and I just stopped doing it, you know? So it's like doing these things that I loved as a kid, and it kind of brought me back into that mind space where I like to say that if I'm constantly doing things I love to do, I'm going to love life. Like, if every day I'm waking up and I'm making videos, and I love making videos, and I love writing songs, so I write songs, and I love spending time with my family, so I spend time with my family, and I love surfing, so then I go surf. Like, my whole life is just I'm gonna be in love my whole life, you know? So kind of like that's what woke me up. And sure, the meditation and the mindfulness and the philosophical studies all had a place to play in it, but honestly, for me, it's more or less just leaning into my creative and curious nature and doing the things that I love to do every day.
So when did you bring in the mindfulness or meditation or the other aspects of it?
Probably a couple months after, kind of like hitting that realization for myself, I suppose. It was more or less like I didn't realize that I was meditating for a while also. It's like, I love music, and I didn't realize that me laying on my bed and just breathing and listening to albums with my eyes closed was like meditating. And I had been doing that for some time, and I was like, let me do this a bit more intentionally, and like sit up and or get in a recliner and like put on some binaural beats or like a guided meditation track. And it kind of just happened pretty organically. I was like, I already was doing this, so let me just like actually do it.
Nice. Was there like an influence in your life? Like, how did you get into it?
Meditation?
Yeah.
No, honestly, I just kind of stumbled upon it. I don't really know. I don't really remember how I started doing it. I used to listen to a lot of like Led Zeppelin and listen to Grateful Dead jam albums and stuff.
Zeppelin got you into meditation.
Yeah, and I just like
That's
closed
awesome.
my eyes and like let it take me, and like I don't know, at some point or another it clicked in my head like, like that makes me feel still. Like, why wouldn't this? So I started to kind of
That's interesting. So sort of something you might normally do, listen to music on a day-to-day basis, you sort of started picking up that there was a bit of a calming effect to just sitting still, being with yourself with the music, and that led into binaural beats, looking up some meditations, and then it just like you notice the effects more and more from there? Or
Yeah, so essentially that, and then also I would say a part to play is like I started looking into all sorts of like different conspiracy theories and aliens and stuff like that, and like the idea of like higher consciousness was introduced in that as well, and like attaining higher elevated states of consciousness, and like a bit of a curiosity from me as well into like psychedelics and like understanding those different things at the same time. Like a lot of it comes back to like stillness and like sitting with yourself and meditation and yeah, so kind of just like a blend of all that stuff.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So it kind of just took on its own life form.
Yeah, it did. So did you start meditation after because you went to school for mindfulness, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So did you start meditation after that, or did you start meditation before that and that led you into that?
Yeah, so I started before school. So I started meditating 7 years ago. It's 2025. So I started meditating 2016, 2017. And I just, again, used one of the meditation apps that are out there. And I think it was just after like a couple of weeks where I was like, I'm feeling a little better here. Like I'm noticing myself feeling a little bit more calm. So I was like, all right, let me keep doing this. And I think it just kept developing more and more and more for myself as I kept doing it. Cause I was like, there's something here. Cause I was always a high strung, you know, I was a salesman for several years, and like we'll have these salesman meetings and it's like all rah and getting super hype and getting excited. But I felt like with those highs came those lows. So the meditation really felt like it tapered those emotions off and let me just be more calm, more aware. And then I learned transcendental meditation, which transcendental meditation, they give this analogy of our mind is like the ocean, and our mind is like the surface of the ocean. So sometimes it's really calm. Sometimes there's a storm that comes in and it's like 20-foot waves, right? And our mind is like super busy. But if you go 2 miles underneath the ocean, like if you were to drop an anchor and go 2 miles underneath, it's just pure stillness. It's just pure quiet. It doesn't matter what's happening on the surface of the ocean. So transcendental meditation teaches you to tap into that inner stillness that we have. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I took a mindfulness course, and then I was like, you know, I really would love to teach mindfulness. Let me dive into this with both feet in. So that's when I decided to get my master's degree in mindfulness. So it was really a progressive journey, I would say, over the last 7 years of just, I think, becoming more curious, because I was born and raised in a Christian home my entire life. And I would say I have a lot of Christian beliefs and values, but I don't necessarily believe in the Christian path, if that makes sense, of like what someone, if they call themselves a Christian, what makes them a Christian. I don't identify with that, but I believe there's a lot of beautiful qualities about Christianity. But I think it was almost like, oh, you know, there's something more here. Like it felt like something was missing from Christianity. Maybe it's just like the structure of Christianity and it feeling too much like religion. But I just noticed, like, whenever I actually come back to myself, there's this power in just being in the present. And yeah, so the journey has flourished and it's still at the beginning. So, we'll see where that goes.
A lifetime of mindfulness.
Lifetime of mindfulness. I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
That's amazing. So this was great chatting.
Yes.
And is there anything you want to plug into the camera before we hop off? Like where we can find you, where we can find Mindful Buddy, like how we can support you as you're on this mission?
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah. If you want to check out Mindful Buddy, we have an Instagram, so you can check us out at mindfulbuddy.ai. We do have a website, literally mindfulbuddy.ai/home. So you can download the app from there. If you just go into the Apple Store or Google Play Store, just literally type in Mindful Buddy and you'll see it pop up. So would love your support. We do have a free version of the app. So if you want to go and just check it out, please, would love to hear your thoughts. You can reach out to me on Instagram. My name is Jeremy Yencer. Yencer. I'm the only one out there, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. There's not too many Yencers out there. So anyways, yeah, I mean, if you're interested in mindfulness, meditation, would love your support and help a small growing app company. That would be amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, this is a pleasure.
This was awesome, dude.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I love
Appreciate
talking
it.
about all this stuff and connecting, and yeah, we'll link all the links for Mindful Buddy and Jeremy in the description. And thank you so much for hanging out with me. You hanging out with me,
Yes.
Jeremy. Appreciate you and appreciate whoever made it to the end of this. So thank you so much, and so much love, so much peace. Namaste, and we'll be back next time.
Namaste.